Well, it's happened to me over the past 30 years in a couple of occasions. And most recently, it was 2 or 3 years ago where it was started, where a non-immediate family, very distant relative, was brought in to be in a joint venture. Unfortunately, there was a misalignment in expectations and understanding, and the younger generation in that case has chosen to leave. I have had other people who have no successors. I remember speaking one time in Bigger, Saskatchewan, where a third of my audience got up when I asked everyone to stand who didn't have a successor in their family. And then I jokingly said, well, you should all be wearing orange t-shirts so that people can come up to you and give you their pitch for becoming a joint venture. So it does happen. There's an article people can Google in Country Guide called Not Related. And that was an interesting journey of a young man in Manitoba who, as a young teenager, started working for a farmer just down the road and had such a strong work ethic and great character that that farmer literally adopted him, so to speak, in a not related succession relationship. So it does happen, but it's not something that I deal with often. My suspicion is the biggest difference is that there has to be a lot of clarifying of expectations and written agreements, especially for compensation. Because another reason why the one I spoke about first didn't work is because the founder of the business wanted to keep owning all the equity, and that just doesn't work. So there's a basic principle in my mind in farm transition that at some point everybody has to have a fair exchange of value. And typically in a family related kind of situation, the successors may be willing to wait or be more patient a little while longer because they know that the family tree or the inheritance line or the shifting of wealth is going to come to them. But even then, you shouldn't assume that. That should be written in a buy-sell agreement, a share agreement, or an operating agreement, some kind of document that proves that there is a plan for you to gain equity or grow shares or however you're going to do it. Now, the problem with the non-related venture is there's going to be possibly other family of that founder or that business owner that's also tugging on wanting to have a transfer of wealth. So I think what happens in that case is you have to have lots of clarity around financial transparency. And I know another reason why this relationship I'm thinking about broke down is because the owner had all kinds of opinion on how the non-related party was spending their money. And he was making assumptions that this non-related party should be giving all in to his business, but he wasn't willing to give up or share the wealth in terms of equity. So there's a bit of a catch-22, I think, when you're working with a non-related party, to be really clear about all of the pieces of the transition. So what is the management agreement going to look like? Where is the debt servicing going to come from? What assets are you going to share? Is it going to be shared ownership, or is there a buyout agreement that over time you will buy out the equipment? Land is a really tough one now because there's no way that these younger next generation farmers can afford to buy millions of dollars worth of land. And yet they want some land as well for equity, to build equity, not just through equipment and inventory. Well, I suspect there's an interesting assumption there in will buy the operation essentially, because that may or may not be the case. You may be given an opportunity to own pieces of it, but not entirely the whole thing. Unless I have another situation that I'm thinking of, and let's talk about a happy story. This is a story where a man who immigrated to Canada, built up some wealth, was in relationship or aware of someone who I know personally, who is a first generation farmer from Winnipeg. And she and her partner bought a quarter section of land from him. They had saved up $40,000 or whatever was needed for a down payment, and now are in a joint venture with him doing commercial cattle and direct beef marketing. But the other interesting thing is that he also is making a way for them to buy the second quarter at a very reduced rate, which I would call fair family price, even though they aren't family, because his goal is to give a leg up to this non-related party. And he also knows he has enough wealth. And so that's a very contrarian way of thinking about things, because a lot of people want more and more and more. And the question in a non-related party joint venture is, how much is enough? How much is enough for the owner, the original owner? And what does the incoming partner, the younger partner, the less asset-based partner, what assets do they have? And quite often with the younger energy, the assets they have in their favor are energy, networking, and time and drive. And so for that first 10 years of that first generation farmer, she worked her butt off, and so did her partner. And they spent very little on living. They lived frugally because they knew that they were going to give it their all for 10 years and see how much equity they could build and how much money they could create to capture wealth. And then they knew that they would start piecing together the puzzle of being landowners. And the other thing you asked about, what does the family need and what does the joint venture partner need? They need the same things. They need honesty. They need financial transparency between both parties. They have to like each other. They have to trust each other. And they have to do conflict well, because there is going to be a disconnect sometimes of what the vision is going forward. And then they also need time to process what the options look like for it to be a win-win for both parties. Because when one person feels like they're giving too much, or they're rolling things over, or they're not getting all of their needs met, then the resentment is going to build, and then the communication is going to start to discombobulate and fragment and not be helpful. Now, in this sad scenario that I alluded to at the beginning, the character was failing. It was selfishness, pride, and another term that I've never heard until the last 3 years in farming is narcissism. And that's selfishness, or it's all about me and what I can create and what I can accomplish. And you don't want to work with a person like that. You want to be in a joint venture with a person you trust. You have aligned values. You value the same thing: honesty, integrity, challenge, teamwork, timeliness. And you want to be a person of your word. And you want to create a culture of win-win for both parties. So watch out for red flags. And Rick Maurer has a book called Why Don't You Want What I Want? And one of the first red flags happens here in the intellect, in the head. And so I ask people to think, are you getting the agreements that make you feel like you have clear understanding? And that would be an operating agreement, a partnership agreement, or if you're buying into shares in a corporation, part of the unanimous shareholders agreement. And then you also should have an exit strategy, because things happen, people die, people get cancer, life changes, and you might want to be bought out. And you may not have gone into that relationship with that intention, but good planners also know that when they join something together, that they're also going to have a way to separate if necessary. The other piece is the emotional factors affecting planning. So it should feel good. In your heart, you should like how this process feels. And then the last part that Rick Maurer talks about, I call it head, heart, and gut. So it's your gut. Intuitively, do you trust this other person? And can you build more trust by well-written agreements, facilitated conversations, and building a team of advisors that you use together? And in the good case scenario that I talked about with the young woman and her partner, the other interesting thing is there is no gender bias there, because she's a woman who has great strategic planning skills, very detail-oriented, hardworking, has a very innovative partner who can make something out of nothing, and innovative and willing to have delayed gratification so that they can get the farm on the feet the way they want it to be. But when she was signing her application for the land mortgage, they wanted his signature, and she was the one who had the deposit. So again, the value system and the respect for both the family of origin that is bringing the new party on and the new party coming in, the next generation who's not related, both parties need the same things. I don't think there's a lot of difference other than the family founders who are bringing in the new partner. They also need to know where their income streams are coming from and that they're secure, because they also need to trust that this new partner is not going to pull them down, but is going to lift them up and actually help give them more energy and synergy to create an even better business going forward. And that's what I love so much about the story I'm telling you about the first generation woman from the city, because she uses social media to publicize the farm. She has a great working relationship with all kinds of peer groups across Canada. They're innovative. I told you her partner's innovative. And the person they're in business with has good character and has a good vision that his future is okay and he'll be okay, and he sees them being okay too. So I really think that you want to work with people who have strong communication, who don't give you the resistance about agreements that they intellectually don't understand. They ask questions emotionally in your heart. You like how this feels. You like these people. If you weren't in business with them, you'd be their friends anyway, because they have a good, trustworthy, respectful relationship with you. And in your gut, you don't lose sleep at night because your neurons aren't telling you that there's a red flag. Your gut is saying intuitively, this is a good decision. So I'm thinking of another situation where I have a neighbor who's 75 years old, who has cows and grain, and he's a bachelor farmer. And I have suggested to a young couple who I know who really longs to have a cattle farm that they start the conversation. So the first thing is, you can't assume that other people know what you're thinking, feeling, needing, and wanting. So I would call it the tailgate conversation, where you sit on the tailgate of the pickup truck and you have very casual inquiry, curiosity conversations about what the future holds for both parties. And then you say, would you be willing to try this out? Because some people need to test things, network, and experiment. And in our coaching model of renewal, the cycle of renewal from the Hudson Institute of Santa Barbara, where I trained as a coach, it's called Getting Ready. And another workshop that I did a long time ago, where I was just in the workshop, I wasn't giving it, it was on landlord relationships and creating those relationships before you need them. So take a survey of all the farms within a 10-mile radius or so of your existing place or where you live, and think about who are the people that look like they don't have a successor. And then you can approach them, and you can approach them not with pushing, shoving, or prejudging the outcome. You approach them with curiosity. And in this landlord workshop that I was in on developing relationships, these young men would visit often, and they would offer help, no strings attached, help with the combining, help with pulling iron out of the yard to sell it to the 2 and 10 steel guys who buy your steel. And they would help them get ready for auction sales or move equipment, and just, do whatever they could to make that person's life easier. But they would also say, I would really like to have a conversation with you about how you want to transition as you age in place on this farm. And my intention is not to push you away, but my intent is to find out if there is a possible way for us to work together. So in conflict resolution, we call that intent, action, effect. So you're very clear what your intention is in developing these conversations with this person. So that's where the definition of financial transparency is the ability to talk about money, whatever questions asked. And so one of the issues for the founding couple is security of future income streams, and that the land or the livestock or the business, whatever kind of farm it is, that it's going to be managed in a stewardly kind of way, and that they've already witnessed how the other next generation manages. And so that's why I'm thinking that having a probationary time is not a bad idea, just to test it out. Or in the case that I told you about from the Country Guide article, is that young man proved himself at 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 and on. So he had years and years of street cred that he wasn't going to be mismanaging things or be hard on equipment or not think in a logical fashion, because he was mentored by the founding generation. So in terms of the finances, the key issue is everyone needs financial wealth to live well. So I am a big proponent of each side of the party having a financial planner to be very clear about where their income's going from. And then also it would be helpful if the founding family is kind of going into a reinvention mode or retirement or whatever you want to call it, and wants to travel half the year, and the other party is going to be stuck holding the bag, moving grain, feeding lots, livestock, and doing all the grunt work. Is that what they signed up for? So there needs to be, along with the financial discussion, a discussion of fair compensation. So is the incoming party, are they being compensated at a good rate as a salary level for salary compensation? And are they also being compensated with opportunity, the opportunity to own assets, which they can hopefully appreciate? And the problem with machinery is it depreciates. But lately, it seems like it's been appreciating because it seems to be a lot more expensive than it used to be. So there's a lot of financial considerations around what's important that is within the corp, if there's a corporate structure, or what's important in the partnership, if there's a partnership structure. I'm not an accountant, so I can't tell you all the financial finessing ways that this can be set up. The bottom line is that people have to ask for what they need, and they have to make sure the other partner feels good and likes the decision that's been made. I know of another situation of two non-related parties who I know very well, who went together as farmers to buy a business that was going south. Unfortunately, that said business is very profitable and has done well, but there's no written shareholders agreement. And so the spouses aren't happy, because if one of the business partners happens to die or get incapacitated, it's not clear how the finances would be arranged. And that's why accountants and lawyers will drum it till the cows come home that you need really good written agreements for all of those risk contingency situations. And in my definition of fairness within a family unit, it's helping everyone be successful. And so if I was taking on a non-family member, which our farm does, by the way, when we take on all kinds of non-family employees, there's still an arrangement and an agreement and a partnership there, and clear expectations of how everybody's working together in the same direction to build wealth and to have a profitable business. So the assumption you're making in the question is that just because it's not a family member, there'll be less emotion. And I don't think so. I think there's a lot of emotion for a lot of sole proprietors and corporate owners who don't have a family successor, who are very proud and thankful and grateful for 40 years of work and what they've managed to build, and that they want that to be well taken care of, and they want the wealth to transfer well and to continue to be captured by their new business partner. So in some cases, the answer may be yes, that it's a less emotional decision because it's treated more like a business. But again, as coaches, one of our favorite questions is, when we talk to a family, is your farm or ranch a lifestyle or is it a business? Because I know many successful family businesses that are businesses and they're not treating it like a lifestyle. And there's one farm I'm thinking of in particular where the mom is like on it. She's type AA. She has Excel spreadsheets. She has taken C-team training. She knows the finances inside and out. And the part that gets her in that particular situation is that the next generation seems to think that it's all just going to come his way. And it's not being reciprocated with a passion to be in management and a passion to be assertive. So I guess long story short, question answer on that question would be, it depends. It depends on whether or not you feel that the farm family is a business. And the second part around the fairness piece and the emotion is it depends whether or not you subscribe to my definition of fairness, which is in our farm family, we help everyone be successful, including our employees and our non-family members and relationships. So I think it's a case-by-case thing. And the point is, how are you showing up to ask the other person, what is it that you need in this moment from this transition? And is there any gaps? Are there still certain things in this conversation that we're trying to work out that we haven't addressed yet? And the people who do really well as founders in these non-related transition plans, I think, are the ones who can step back without stepping away, and they take on a different role as compassionate mentor because they want everyone to succeed in this partnership. And they also have something else beyond the farm business that they are looking forward to because now they have a successor to help continue the income and wealth generation of the farm. So there's many different layers and it could be complicated. Absolutely. And the one that was kind of blew up and didn't go in the right direction as planned and hoped for was because there was a lot of lifestyle pressures by the founder. And how would you feel if you were busting your butt as the next gen and the day the combines come off the field, vamoose, the founder is gone to play rather than clean up and get things organized in the bin and set out a marketing plan and do due diligence and maybe wait a couple of weeks until things got completed before you take off to practice your lifestyle. So again, that's a misalignment or a disconnect of the value system of the non-related next gen person coming in as a partner and the founder not being clear about expectations because there was disappointment in what actually transpired. And it was just another sign that this was not going to be a good fit because the lifestyle trumped everything. Well, I've been really endorsing people get Dr. Marshall Rosenberg's book on nonviolent communication, and I keep it here under my desk. And here it is. And it talks about empathy, collaboration, authenticity, and freedom. But his 4 stages of having these emotional conversations is observing. So in a family, you've had months, years, decades of observing how people do drama or conflict or resolve things. And you may have certain stories that you're telling yourself. But if you grew up in a different family that's non-related, you're still going to have stories that you're telling yourself. And nobody has any hot clue what those are unless you start expressing them and making observations. So in Rosenberg's work, it's observe, feel, talk about your needs, and then make a request. And so again, I want to challenge that thinking because every person has a high degree of need for intimacy to love and be loved. Everybody needs to have self-actualization and make sure that they have purpose and meaning in their life. So whether they grew up in your family or not, you talked about the word baggage. Well, a lot of farm families don't have any understanding of the emotional baggage they're carrying because they don't have hard conversations around tough issues. They walk away or they go to the shop or they don't participate and they become silent. So I can't predict what a family member is going to say, think, feel, need, or do, but I can ask powerful questions. And so I think in terms of wanting to find success in these non-related joint ventures is having a facilitated third party, an objective third party, come and help you gather the data and the emotional baggage that anybody is carrying into that negotiation. Because everybody, as Brene Brown says, has a story. So the question is, what is the story that your non-related partner is telling themselves about having success with you? And how do they feel about money? How do they feel about debt servicing? How do they feel about sharing their personal financial information or their goals about how soon they want to build a $500,000 house? Because all of the things that you bring to the table as a person and as a business partner are going to be impacted by how you navigate the relationship with the founder, who's also a person and a business partner. And what disturbs me in agriculture, and I quite often say what's killing agriculture, is procrastination and conflict avoidance. And if you are working in a new relationship to build a business partnership, you have to be timely, you have to have well-written agreements, and you have to navigate hard conversations when things don't seem right. Conflict is not bad. It just needs to be resolved. And so as a business partner, you need self-awareness around creating solutions, and baggage may come into that. If you're not good at that, you need to share your emotions. You need to reach out. You need to adapt. And you need to not prejudge the outcome. And you need to be able to have empathy, which is putting yourself in the other person's shoes and know what a founder who's aging might be afraid of. Treat people as valued human beings and understand that everybody needs to be seen and everybody needs to be heard. And when joint ventures between family members or joint ventures between non-related members, the reason they break down is people are not getting what they want. And there's a very interesting book you might want to read by Dr. Henry Cloud called Necessary Endings: What to Do When Things Don't Work Out. And in agriculture, we need to give permission to families who don't like each other. Don't force them to work together. And this happens very often with brothers. I've written tons of blogs on Yes, I Have a Brother. So those brothers, one of them might decide to go off and away and be in a joint venture with somebody non-related, and he or a daughter would have a much better experience having a lot more self-awareness about what they truly believe to be true, how they want to behave, and the kind of decision-making power they want to have in their business. And that's called culture beats strategy, which is a term that Peter Drucker, a management guru in the States, always said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I think if we summate the whole conversation that we've had today, it really comes down to, what do you believe? What are your values of both partners? How are you going to behave with each other in terms of that financial transparency and written agreements? And thirdly, what's your plan for how you're going to collaborate to make decisions as a business? Because what you probably want is a business, not a lifestyle.